Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, my precious pack, and welcome back once more to VEGA Conflict. Today we're not going to talk about Alien Strike, we're not going to talk about Decimation, we're not going to talk about missions or anything like that. We're actually going to talk about the upcoming Orator Dreadnought. We're still waiting for its release, still no information about when it's going to be released publicly and things like that, but for some of us, we can at least view it in the workshop. And right now I'm going to give a quick rundown of the three Dreadnoughts as they stand and how they are going to be released. First off, we have the first two. The Behemoth is essentially the tank of the group, having 200,000 effective hit points with a good fitting, as well as the raw brute force behind that hit points to be able to get the job done. The Segfault. It is actually the stealth ship of the group, and it is exceptional at moving. When it phases at max, it gains an additional 1,100 meters per second on top of its already impressive 500 meters per second. Back that up by a good health amount, a good amount of screen energy as well as health, and some good damage over time, and it can break anything if you give it the time, and you learn how to fly it. Finally, we have another one. We have the Orator Dreadnought, and I actually want to talk about the Elite version, but I'm actually going to talk about the Mark I because that's the one that will be readily available upon release. Now, I can't show the fitting because, unlike a few people on mobile, I actually can't open it up to view the constructed ship, so I can't see the fitting, but I do know what the fitting is because of what we've been told and what people have leaked on the Discord and things like that. Though I could talk about other ships. The reason I decided to talk about the Orator is because it's how it plays. We have a stealth ship, a brutal fighter, and then we have a carrier. That's right, it's essentially a Dreadnought carrier because of what it does. It has a unique spawning mechanic that is improved slowly as it ranks up. Pardon me for just a moment. That spawning system actually involves little vessels that we currently know the name of as Zealots. The stats for the Zealots are still unknown, but other than that, they're going to essentially serve the purpose of a squadron without the negative aspects of a squadron, because as we've asked before in the Discord during a dev chat, they won't lose damage as they're damaged, so you won't have to worry about like a squadron if it gets to a target at 50% health. It's not going to lose 50% of its damage. It will maintain the overall value, which is a very, very great upside. What does the Orator bring into the fight? Well, it brings a small amount of health, but I mean, in comparison to the other Dreadnoughts, it actually has the lowest amount, but it has the lowest repair time. It has the same mass as the other Dreadnoughts, if I'm not mistaken. Indeed it does. The cargo space, it actually has less than I believe the Segfault, but more than the... yeah, it has more than the Behemoth, but less than the Segfault. So at max, it'll be right in between the two. It has the same movement speed, same rotation speed, same strafe speed, and sector speed as the other two Dreadnoughts at Mark I. So those stats do not change, so let's talk about the modifiers and its overdrive. Multiple. First, I cannot compare it to the Behemoth or the Segfault in these regards because its overdrives are unique to it. Let's go ahead and let's take a look at the first one, Unite. When 3,000 damage is taken to the shields, it activates an offensive surge in its spawned ships for 5 seconds. What is this boost? Well, the ships get 6% increased shield defense, which means that things can only bypass 4% of the damage to the ship. They gain a 50% damage per second boost over their base value, and a 50% ship speed increase over their base value. So not half bad depending on what the stats are going to be. And they get phase charge hacking of 75% for 10 seconds. That just completely stomps the previous charge hacking value that the Renaissance has of, at max, it's what, 40%? It just completely blows that out of the water. It's in an entirely different league. And that's a good thing. And Breakpoint. When 4 spawn ships are lost, trigger a defensive bonus to the Dreadnought to increase survivability for 3 seconds. It gains a 0-second delay charge value of 2 energy per second back of its shield. And that it actually already has by default 2, so in total it'll have 4. It has 20% increased pharmacon damage, increased health, increased damage per second, and it also has 100% stasis resistance. And there's actually other stats that I'll talk about here in just a minute at the maximum mark level. So the main one I want to talk about is the mark 1 that we'll all have. By default, 50% alien resistance, which is natural, 100% nebula resistance, 0% plasma resistance, 100% nebula plasma resistance, and it has 10 counter chain and 10 counter pierce. So most weapons in the game will not be able to punch through it or chain over it, unless you're using ricochet. But if you're using ricochet, then you're most likely going to be fighting the drones because the ship itself will just be running away from you. Now, let's go ahead and let's take a look at the elite and compare the stats. Okay, maximum mass, it's going to be the same as the other Dreadnoughts. So the carrier Dreadnought is looking extremely good in that regard. Cargo, as I said, it is actually between the Behemoth and the Segfault. Segfault being the best for hauling cargo, but I mean, if you get any of the Dreadnoughts, they're going to be good in multiple regards, depending on what you're using them for. And sector speed gets boosted up to the 390 astronomical units per hour that we're used to seeing. All lovely stats. On to the modifiers. What does Unite look like at Elite? Well, now you have to take 2,500 damage to the shields to activate the surge in the ships for 5 seconds. However, that surge is now 100% damage boost, 10% shield defense increase, and a 100% movement speed increase. So they just get a major buff from over the default value, which is actually extremely good. Phase charge hacking, however, doesn't increase, it actually remains at 75. So right from the get-go, it's good for tanking and just dishing out the pain. And for the targets that destroy the ships, let's go ahead and let's take a look at the breaking point of the Orator at Elite. It has 2 spawned ships. Okay, when 2 spawned ships are lost, it triggers the defense for 8 seconds, and it gets a 5% shield energy regeneration bonus with no delay. So it just starts recharging 5% per second for 8 seconds. And it gains a 5% shield defense increase, so it goes from 90% up to 95%. That's amazing, but that's not all. Sound like a salesman now. Pharmacon damage doesn't go up. Armor health goes up from 65 up to 250% increase, and that's over the base value, so you know it'd be 350%. Because the base value of the armor would be, let's say, 1,000, and you'd add this on top of it, so it'd be about 3,500 hit points, because it would be giving an additional 250%, which would be 2.5 times on top of the base value. So a very lovely amount of health. Damage per second, standardized for all the Dreadnoughts at the maximum level, being 200%. Spawner mass is reduced, so you can actually use heavier zealots with it, and from what we understand, there's actually 4 levels of zealots, just like the standard weapons they have. We have blueprint weapons up to level 3, and level 4 weapons are typically a reusable item. So we can expect them to be extremely heavy if we're getting a 50% off of their health, of their spawner mass. Well, of their mass period. Oh, I forgot to mention the shield energy increase. 150% increase over your base shield values, and this is something that I had theorized and just made up in the ideas for when I was working with the stats, when I was making my initial fitting for my Elite one, when I checked the weight and everything like that. Well, not the weight, the actual shield strength. I can push it to over 100,000 hit points of shield strength, but it hardly gets over 100,000 hit points of normal health, even using a fully armored up build. So it's not going to be the most durable of them, but it's still going to be a carrier, and you can use it like one. It's just much faster. 5% shield energy regeneration with no delay by default, so that is a very lovely addition. If you have it at Mark 6 or Elite, you'll be able to regenerate effectively 5% of 100,000 hit points per second. Yep, that's right, 100,000 hit points per second, and I mean, you're actually going to be regenerating more than that, but that's just the base value. 100% stasis resistance, still the same. Resistance, you now have 50% plasma resistance, everything else stays the same. A boost to defense resistance. Ooh. Boost resistance and reduce damage on the ship's defense. It increases shield resistances by 10% across the board, and it increases shell resistances by 10% across the board against all the damage types they're meant to block: plasma, alien, explosive, kinetic, and energy. So this means that you're reducing the negative value at the Mark Elite ship by 10%, and that's a 25% increase of damage by normal standards. That's only 15%. And for your main value you use, if you use alien shell or the plasma shell, that jumps up to 85%. That is impressive, especially for a Dreadnought. But that about covers what it does. Now, how do I see it? Oh, I actually need to stay there because I actually want to talk about it further and theorize how it's going to behave. Now, as I kept saying, what we've been leaked, it sounds to me like a Dreadnought carrier, because we have a Dreadnought cruiser, which just smashes everything into the ground, a Dreadnought-style stealth ship, which is essentially the Trojan, a super Trojan, and now we have essentially a super carrier. Well, not super carrier, Dreadnought carrier, because it will have spawner slots. And another thing, I completely forgot to talk about the fittings, didn't I? At Mark 1, it has access to the same number of armor slots and shield slots as the Orator as the Segfault and the Behemoth have at their respective Mark levels as well. So by default, they all have 4 armor slots and 4 of their defense slots. In the case of the Behemoth and the Segfault, respectively, it is ablative and screens, and in the case of the Orator, it is going to be the shells, or basic shields, whichever you can use. It will have 4 special slots, 3 weapon slots, so it'll have the lowest number of weapon slots by default, but it will come equipped with 3 spawner slots. That's all the stuff that was publicly leaked that we know that was in the Discord, and that's all that I can actually share, because other than that, there hasn't been too much else said about it. So I should be asking questions of the development team about the ship, but I haven't been, because apparently I'm getting lazy, which is changing. Okay, now with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and let's theorize exactly what we can use this ship for. Well, if it's going to be a Dreadnought supercarrier, essentially, that spawns mini-ships, depending on how good the ships are, we might be able to use it in a traditional carrier role. And before anybody asks, before we had assault carriers, which is the carriers we have now, which have just guns instead of squadrons, drones, and swarms, we had to use standard carriers with swarms, drones, and squadrons. And the tactic for them, typically if you used them alone, was just to run away from the target and allow your hangar swarms and things like that to just decimate the target while you just ran away. Well, I can actually see the Orator in a similar position, just running away and having it attack targets, because it will be extremely good at that, because 500 meters per second by default, along with whatever damage per second you can push the little tiny demon ships to, it'll be exceptionally good for them. Though it does bring up many questions, but I am positive that they'll be able to be answered over time thanks to the development team. And if anyone actually wants to speak with the lead developer at times, they do open a dev chat in the Discord. And that's where I tend to get my information from, or at least when I need public information that I can share with everyone, that I don't have to ask privately in the inside group or anything like that. But other than that, there's not much else to talk about for the theories behind the Orator, because I do see it as a super Dreadnought, or a Dreadnought carrier, that's primary goal is going to be the traditional role of a carrier, and that is running away while its spawns do all the work. So, in theory, this is a very novel ship that we're actually being given. Again, we don't have any public release dates or anything like that for it, so I'm a little bit disappointed. But, upon release, we're going to have an extremely fun ship. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and prepare a video talking about it more in depth on the day of its release, as well as share some pictures and things like that of it. So you can see it in-game right through a little video that'll probably be about 20 minutes long or something like that, just to more or less buy time until later in the day, because I will spend that day that it is released, I will farm it and I will use the coins that I'm saving up to build it. and make sure that I do an active review and everything like that of it, so you can all see what the targets are like and things like that. And I'm going to use my Elite Behemoth, and right now, the big lady is slowly being refitted. She's getting her final fitting. And this has been a long time coming for her. And it feels extremely good to see her slowly transforming from what she is currently into that end fitting. Though it takes time because I'm crafting credit items, I'm switching over to blight damage. I'm going to give her an all Umbra Escort so I can actually take advantage of the 10% damage increase that Victoria gives with the Umbra faction. But that's it, everybody. I don't want to talk too long because I don't want to lose my voice, because I have a lot of videos to make very soon, and I need to save some of my voice for those videos. But that's going to be it. Theory crafting wise, what do you guys think of the Orator Dreadnought? For those of you who can't see it in the workshop currently, well, you can actually see it in this video, and this is again on the live server, because I don't have access to the preview server, nor do I actually want access to it. So when a few people found out, they messaged me on Discord saying that it wasn't right that I was added, or that I was asked to join the Players Inside group, and yada yada yada. But the one thing they didn't understand was I actually did it so I could get information for future videos, so I could actually be a little bit more informed about what's coming up, help suggest some stuff, things like that, and just behave in a slightly more open manner towards newer content. And I got an NDA just like everybody else, and I wanted to make sure that everybody understands that, because when I'm bringing it up now, I'm not going to share any details of anything that's coming up or anything like that. I don't have too much more information, because again, I haven't been asking questions like I should be. I've mainly been focusing on myself lately, especially as of today, and anyone who follows Discord, they understand that something happened today. But that's going to be it, everybody. Go ahead, share your theory ideas on what the Orator Dreadnought's going to be like. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you're looking forward to it. We're getting a Dreadnought carrier, and oh boy, can I not wait to sink my fangs into it. But be safe out in the void, everybody, and as always, I will see you in the next video.